Well, what is up, everybody? Welcome back to Camp on a Schlocka. I am Darby Ellis Lewis with me. What's my name? We haven't done this in so long. I'm Darby Ellis Lewis Wilson, and this is Chris Anonymous. Chris, TGIF, buddy. How's it going?
Man, it's Friday the 13th. It's awesome, man. These are always my favorite holidays of the year.
Yeah, man. I absolutely love doing like these special holiday uh schlock movies. Like
Yeah.
I think that is so fun when we get together for Halloween or we do a Friday the 13th or we do something for Christmas. These are definitely my favorite shows. So while we are still kind of not it's not a hiatus, right? I don't think it's a hiatus.
Yeah.
We're just doing like the modern cool thing where it's just many years between episodes, but we're
Right.
actually doing a
Right.
lot better.
We're legacy sequeling ourselves.
Yeah, yeah, right. We're gonna just start replaying the old hits from the other episodes.
Yep.
Like
That's, I mean,
get away
content.
from her, you B
Person.
word. Uh, so of course it is Friday the 13th, year of our Lord 2024, and we have started a semi-tradition of doing Friday the 13th movies whenever there's a Friday the 13th. And
How
this
ironic.
tradition is so long standing, we are on the third movie. So we've made it very far.
Yeah.
Uh, but I actually have a lot to talk about in this movie, I think, because when I sat down and rewatched it again for the first time and probably, I don't know, a decade, 15 years or something,
It's probably been
I
about that long for me.
yeah, I kept pausing it. I pause these movies to take notes and whatnot, but I was pausing it like every couple of minutes and just like, oh man, oh, that's really interesting. This is really interesting. So there's a lot to talk about with this movie.
Hmm.
Let's see, it was created in 1982. I believe it technically takes place in the future, though, because the first movie came out in 1980, I believe,
Yeah.
and then but it actually takes place in 79 or 75, somewhere in that time span.
Yeah.
I
So
think
this,
I think 79
yeah. This one takes place immediately after part two. And I can't
and
remember when part two
part two
takes
is
place.
5 years after.
Okay. So
So
it's probably pretty close to the time of the when it was released, or
yeah,
early 80s.
well, so let's see, 79, it'd be 1984 when it takes place. And jumping ahead a little bit, but I think this is a really interesting question. Does it matter if Friday the 13th movies take place on Friday the 13th? Because I think at this moment in time, by the time we reach part three, and definitely by the time we reach part four, I think we're on like Monday the 16th.
Yeah, no, I don't think it matters. Basically, it's just another name for Jason Kills.
Right. Well,
Right.
so it's not like the movies I think necessarily have to take place on Friday the 13th. This is something I'm just kind of trying to mentally track
Right.
as we go through these. Like, is it on Friday the 13th?
But
Or is it just significant that Jason was born on Friday the
I
13th?
think that's more the significance because it's in the three that we've rewatched and I've seen them all. I don't ever recall it being very important that like he can only come out on Friday the 13th or we have to make it to midnight by Friday the 13th. There's no like mythology built into the story that has to do with Friday the
Right,
13th except for his birth. So that would be
right.
a cool feature in a Friday the 13th movie, but I don't think it matters.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong. I haven't seen all of the Halloween movies. Just I think the first one, part of the second one, a long time ago, H2O, and then the new ones, and also the Rob Zombie ones. Uh,
You haven't
Michael
seen part
Myers,
3?
I haven't seen part three.
Oh man. Okay.
Oh, Season of the Witch. Yeah, I
Right.
definitely haven't seen that. Um, but correct me if I'm wrong. You know more about Halloween than me. Does Michael Myers basically power down until Halloween?
I don't remember because I've seen them all, but I haven't seen 4, 5, or 6 for a score, 20
Yeah.
plus years.
Yeah.
So I don't remember. I mean, 1, 2, and 3 I've seen a lot because I really love 1. Halloween 3 is amazing. It's not a Mike Myers movie, but it's amazing.
Well,
Yeah, so
well, I really like the idea of Jason not necessarily being like the Friday the 13th killer.
right.
But I like the idea. Man, we are just like getting right into schlock. But I like the idea that he's more of like this territorial creature, right? He
Yeah, it's
stalks Camp Crystal Lake.
it should be called the Crystal Lake Killer, not Friday
Yeah.
the 13th.
Yes, exactly. So all things that we can dive into a little bit deeper later on. This movie it costs $2.2 million to create. It costs, I think, substantially more than that after it was created because they had to essentially retrofit a whole bunch of movie theaters, like over 1,000 theaters, I think, wherever it was released, to make it in 3D. But it seems to have paid off because it made, let's see, $36.7 million.
It's
That
like
is a pretty dang good return.
isn't like the third highest grossing of the Friday the 13th?
It is the fourth highest grossing
Okay.
of the Friday the 13th. Adjusted for inflation, it is the ninth highest grossing slasher of all time.
It's got to be one of the first it is the first slasher in 3D. So I mean, and 3D was just well, I mean, there's some like old 50s horror movies that
Yeah,
when
like
3D was
all
a
the
thing.
William Castle stuff.
Right. But like for modern 3D and like slashers, it's the first. And I think there were a lot of 3D movies that came out in that early 80s area.
Yeah, there was really like a big 3D boom going on. We had Jaws 3D, Amityville Horror 3D. Yeah, there were a bunch. I know that uh, Nightmare on Elm Street eventually came out with a 3D film, which I think that was maybe actually substantially later. But there's a whole list that you can go down and find. It was the hot new thing, man.
I wonder when the next wave of 3D is going to hit. Totally unrelated, but like, because was it like 09, 08, 09,
Mhm.
010 when we had the next real big bubble of 3D?
Yeah, yeah. See, one of the things I love about this movie and kind of all of the older 3D movies in general, right? I wasn't around, even if I was around, if I was alive, I wasn't able to go see them in theaters and have that 3D experience.
Right.
So I've only ever seen them, uh, at home, and I just
Hmm.
love that there are these movies that exist where the camera work in them is just totally like kind of bonkers, like people like pointing at the camera, and
Yeah.
it's seemingly for no reason. Like, oh,
So yeah, I want to get back to that later, but yeah, there's a weird aesthetic that involves that. But yeah, let's put a pin in that. Any other factoids before I get into Web of Schlock?
um, I believe we have a comment in the chat here. I don't have stuff like that pulled up because, man, we're so rusty. We got to kick the rust off this hog.
That's the
um,
comment.
no, no, that's just my brain. That's just my
Okay.
brain. Great death arrow to the eye. Yes,
Yeah. Yes,
that
it is.
I mean, that is part of the 3D schlocky goodness where
Yeah,
they have to point it directly at the camera,
and that's
correct?
one of the best kills in the movie.
And we see that. I think you can also see it on the snake at the beginning. You can totally see the string. The string must have been like connected right to the camera,
Right.
so it can go
Dude, are
directly
you
into
in
the lens.
3D?
Dude, I am. You just got to put your special glasses on.
Oh, I've got them.
Uh, so let me see. Yeah, I don't have any more factoids. This is a movie that the Friday the 13th fandom is so big that people have picked this movie apart to death. They know all the ins and outs of it. So if you want to see more trivia, check out IMDb or what's that other place people look up information? Wikipedia. Wikipedia. Oh, actually, I do have one other thing before we get into Web of Schlock. Uh, just because this is all kind of preliminary stuff. Talk about Halloween a little bit earlier. So this movie seems to have gone through, it seems like quite a few iterations in the writing process, or at least in the concept process. So
Yeah, in the
uh,
development.
I believe the original idea for it, at least, I don't know if there's a script. The original idea was that Jenny from the previous film,
From the
Amy Still, I think the actress's name is,
yeah.
um, she was supposed to, I think, wake up in a hospital after being carted away, and Jason is stalking her at the hospital, which sounds very familiar.
Right. Friday. Yeah, exactly. Little Halloweeny.
Which is why I'm sure one of the reasons they didn't do it. The other one, which I think sounds a lot more interesting, is that uh, it's supposed to take place, I think, maybe a few years or at least a few months after part two.
Mhm.
And Jenny, she, due to what has happened to her, she has taken like some self-defense courses and things like that. And I think in her dorm room or something like that, she finds Paul dead. Right, that was a big
Okay.
question at the
Right.
end of part
Right.
two. What happened to Paul?
Yeah, because he
Um,
lives.
yeah, well, I think this movie kind of answers, and we can get into that later, answers what happened actually at the end of part two. But so yeah, he lives, but she finds him dead in her dorm room, and then she goes on a spree to find Jason and seek revenge. And I think
Right.
I think that's kind of
That
interesting,
would have
right?
been a cool movie. Friday the 13th. I'm still Jenny from the block. Yeah.
Exactly, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, don't be fooled by the schlock that I got.
Right.
Uh, but I think, and we have some people watching the live stream right now. Maybe they know. I think the real reason why none of this happened was because I believe the actress was actually stalked after
I
part
believe, yeah.
two.
And she was kind of like turned off from acting and like, no, I'm
Yeah,
gonna peace out.
yeah. So that's all I have for little tidbits. What this show is, we like to talk about the good, the bad, and the schlock, what we like, what we didn't like, and then schlock is kind of our catch-all, what we think are some interesting ideas or things that we notice in the movie. But first, before we get into all of that, we want to know who these people are that created this film, where they came from, and where they're going, in a little segment called Web of Schlock. Hit me
Yeah.
up, Chris.
All right. So the director, Steve Miner, we have already talked about him twice on the show. He directed Friday the 13th Part 2, and then
Hmm.
now Friday the 13th Part 3. And then after that, he went on to direct a little movie called House, which is a
Yes.
great
Yep.
horror movie. Then Warlock. Then he did some like family friendly movies in the 90s. And then in the turn of the century, he returned to horror a bit with Halloween H2O and Lake
Okay.
Placid. So, I mean, this guy has some great horror movies under his belt. He's
Yeah.
definitely schlock royalty. The writers, Carol Watson and Martin Kitrisser, I'm sure I'm butchering their names, husband and wife. Uh, they wrote they wrote this. Then they wrote Meatballs 2, and then the husband alone, Martin, went on to write um, Friday the 13th, New Beginning. So he
Okay.
skipped one. He gets character credit for part 4, but then he goes on
Hmm.
to write part 5, and then he also wrote part 5 and another thing we've seen him before on the show, Silent Night, Deadly Night 5, The Toy Maker.
Perfect.
Yeah, so it's a fun,
Doing the fives.
right. Um, Actresses, the woman who played Chris Higgins, Dana Kimmell, she was also in Sweet 16, Lone Wolf McQuaid, a lot of 80s TV
Okay.
shows, A-Team, Heart to Heart. And then after about 1990, around there, she just kind of not a lot more films. And then now she's supposed to appear in another fan film of Friday the 13th, Crystal. I can't remember which one it is, but yeah, Origin of Evil, I think. Which is cool. There's another thing I want to bring up.
Okay.
Uh, I'll point it out with these actors. I'll bring up two more actors in this film, but all of them, they like stopped acting, 80s, early 90s, late 90s, right? but they all have come back in the recent years to do a lot of low budget horror movies. And we've seen this a lot, that a lot of the stars of these 80s and early 90s horror movies are having a fun resurgence in the low budget indie world of horror, which is really cool. Tracy Savage, who played Debbie in this, before this, she was in Little House on the Prairie, which is a very cool juxtaposition from going from that to something like this. Now she's in lots of new horror movies. I mean, she had like a 20-year gap between acting, but like Crooked Man, 13 Fanboy, things like that.
Okay.
And then Larry Zerner, who played Shelly.
Shelly.
Yep. And again, he didn't act much, maybe a little bit of TV right after this movie, and then took a pause until 2017, and he was in Knights of Badassdom, and now he's in a bunch of
I've seen
like
that.
Death House, Never Be Alone 2, just lots of schlocky B horror movies. So I think that's a really, really cool trend, that a lot of these actors that you're like, oh, I really liked him in this, I wonder if they did anything else, and they're like nothing for decades, and now they're getting a resurgence. Even if it's just a cameo, it's still really cool.
Yeah, that's awesome. Never Hike Alone. That's those are free to watch on YouTube, and they're kind of considered, I think, somewhat canon within certain fandoms. But since they're on YouTube, we should maybe do some sort of watch along with them at some
that'd
point,
be fun.
because they're actually very well made. I got to add one thing. We got from the chat. We're having some problems here, and I can't get the chat put up onto the screen. But this is from Rory McAlpine.
That's a great name.
That is an awesome name. It sounds like he should be in an action flick.
It does.
But he has corrected me. I am a dum-dum. It was Adrian King from the first film that quit.
Oh, that's right.
Not Hayden Steele. So yeah, she must have truly just been busy.
Yeah. Or maybe she heard that the one from the previous one got stalked and just didn't. Yeah. It's I seen the writing on the wall. I know what's happening. Preemptive. Smart girl.
Yeah. But I got one question for you. You might not know. I'm really interested. What family-friendly movies did Steve Miner do?
Okay, let me pull this up because they're on the tip of my tongue. But you've heard of them. On Forever Young with Mel Gibson, I'm pretty sure.
Okay.
And I think
is that
it's
where he's
Wild.
Like a time traveler.
I can't remember.
Or is it like Idiocracy?
He comes back. I think that's the one where he was like asleep for a long time, but it might be time travel. I can't remember. And then I want to say Wild at Heart was the other one.
Okay.
Dun, dun, dun.
So it's not like George Miller where he does like post-apocalyptic S&M gang fighters and then goes into doing Babe and Happy Feet.
Well, I mean, Wild Hearts Can't Be Broken. That's like a G-rated Disney movie. I remember when that came out in 91 with horses. Then Forever Young, My Father the Hero, which is kind of a rom-com from 94. Some TV episodes like Chicago Hope, Raising Cain, a kids movie called Big Bully starring Tom Arnold, and Rick Moranis.
I think I remember that. Yeah, with Rick Moranis.
So no, he did 4 episodes of Dawson's Creek. I mean, no, he went full on like George Miller type thing. Like,
all righty, well, sweet. Yeah, if you're in the chat, I'm going to try and keep up with this. If you got any tasty tidbits for us, or I say something that is just completely wrong, please let us know. Let's get on to our good. Chris,
okay.
What do you have for good?
I mean, I have a lot of good, but it also kind of dovetails into schlock. So I'll list some of the ones here, and then we'll talk about some of the others later. The opening credit music, just the score. I love.
Absolutely.
Yeah, this guy's done many of the films. He might have done them all, but I know he did like up through 6, I think. But yeah, it's just so good. But like his creepy music in the movie is really good. But then it's kind of like almost synth wave kind of.
It's super funky, like the intro like and ending.
Yeah, but I really love it.
It cracked me up because it sounded last Halloween when we did Ernest Scared Stupid. It
Yeah.
sounded exactly like the Ernest Scared Stupid intro, like ooh, like
And the
it's so
3D
crazy.
credits coming in, going over it. It's
I
amazing.
I want that to come back. I want like the next A24 horror house film to come out. I want it to have a funky intro.
I can't
Let's
wait
make
till
that
we
happen.
yeah, it totally should. I can't wait till we get to part 6 of this though, because that has my favorite
Mhm.
music of all the Friday the 13th. But we'll get to
Absolutely.
that in 3 Friday the 13th from now. The 3D in general, I love it,
Mhm.
especially watching it in 2D because it's so jarring and obvious, but it
Right.
doesn't quite have the same effect. But it does have an effect, and this is what I wanted to talk about. You brought it up earlier. It reminds me of reading something written in the second person.
Okay.
Like, like you came to the door and you turned the handle and you listened and there were footsteps outside. You took a breath. Like that you almost never read anything in second person because it's so jarring. Like a lot of kids books, choose your own adventures, they were in the second person,
Mhm.
but it makes the watcher or the reader part of the story, whether they want it to be or not. And so it's a very disconcerting, kind of weird feeling. And I
Mhm.
think when you do a 3D movie in 2D, when it's directly at the camera like that, it makes me feel more like it's directly at me and I'm
Yeah.
in the story. So it's got this weird
It's
parallel to stories written in the second person, which is just odd but kind of cool.
it's like specifically drawing you in.
Correct. Yeah, and it looks cool, but it's also silly at the same time, like the juggling and the popcorn and the
Mhm.
yo-yo.
Mhm.
Yeah, not to mention all the cool kills, but like, um, the hockey mask. I mean, are the first 2 really Friday the 13th movies? Yeah. Are they Jason movies? I don't know. This is where I think
The sh
Jason comes into his own.
Exactly. I mean, the hockey mask is so completely iconic that I remember, before I even really knew about Friday the 13th, and I was watching cartoons as a
Right.
kid, right?
Yeah.
If the joke was ever about, a crazy killer, I'm specifically thinking of like Tiny Toons. Uh, they would have the person come out with a hockey mask on it and a
Chainsaw.
chainsaw. That
Yep.
that to me is synonymous with the slasher
That
genre.
is the stereotype. That is the generic shorthand for any slasher. Yeah, hockey
Mhm.
mask, chainsaw, or machete.
Exactly.
Um,
Yeah. And I want to get into this a little bit more in Schlock, about the purpose of the mask.
I want to get into the meta nature of horror movies influencing people watching horror movies who are characters in movies who then create the horror. It's weird, but we'll get in the Shelly and the Mask. I really want
You
to get into
lost me,
that in Schlock.
Sherlock, but stick around.
Yeah. You're like, this man's on crack. So I said the 3D, the kills. There are some good kills in the first 2 movies, and there are some
Mhm.
bad kills in this, but this is where the kills really start to step up, and that's part of the fun of a slasher movie. So
Mhm.
I thought that was good. And then
Yeah, I like that they put in the biker gang, right? They're really like nothing that progresses the story along. They're basically there for cannon fodder.
they are
You,
for
you
cannon
know,
fodder. There I love that. It's also in my bad, which we'll get to, but I do
okay.
like that they're there. My last good is Chris Higgins versus Jason.
Hmm.
I love the climax. It's she fights back.
Man,
She is stopping him. He's relentless and he's supernatural, so she can't ever quite win, but man, she tries.
if if I had to compare it to the previous two, I would say that I don't think she fights back as well as the previous Final Girls. However, when she's at the top of the barn and he gets knocked out, and the fact that her first intuition is, I'm gonna hang this dude.
Right?
Like, I think that's like so cold
And then
blooded. I
kick
was
him
like,
off. Yeah.
dude.
Yeah. I wish because she knew this cabin and knew this area, when she starts going back into the house before she gets to the barn,
Hmm.
in a different movie, I wish she would have Home Aloned it a little more.
Oh, that would have been cool.
Right? Like she's fighting back. She's there to get over her trauma, avenge, stop this supernatural killer,
Hmm.
and she's on her own turf in a way,
Yeah.
right?
Well,
So I think that's
so
kind of a missed opportunity.
this yeah, this movie is hard for me in some ways because if I'm going to be completely honest, that I don't think that this is a very good movie, but I still love it. Like when I was watching it, I was like, man, I don't think the dialogue is very good. I don't think that they're setting up things very well.
No,
Um, like
they're not.
for instance, we have the bikers come and they siphon the gas. The gas goes to the barn. The barn is obviously a big set piece. The barn should be burnt down at the end, right?
Yeah, with him
There's
in it.
budget things, but there are budget things to consider. But right, like there's it's just not put together very well, and in a lot of ways it's really lacking, but I
Mhm.
can't exactly put my finger on it. I still really love this movie.
There's an energy to it that's different. Like
Yeah,
it's my favorite Friday the 13th until part 4.
right, right.
Like I
Um,
think part 1 is a better movie, but again, this is where I get Jason, and if I'm going to watch Friday the 13th, that's what I'm watching it for.
exactly. Like, I mean, it's peak Jason for
Yeah.
sure.
Yep. So that's all I have for good. I mean, the rest is going to be schlock, and we can deep dive into a couple different things. Um,
Okay.
so what
The
else do you have for
the
good?
the last good that I have, which I mean, I have a lot of good, but I think it's gonna come out later. But the big noticeable good is that I like that in this movie there's very little nudity. Uh, I think it shows that you can make this movie and this series and do it well, despite what I just
Classy.
said. Right?
You can make it
You can make a
classy.
glassy, just a little side boob. You know what I'm saying? um, whereas, like, I don't know at what point in time, but I know by the time part nine comes around, it's basically softcore porn in some parts. So, and for someone like me, right, I grew up watching like the USA versions
Right.
of it, right, and that didn't like it didn't hinder my enjoyment of these films at all. So yeah, I gotta put that in the good column. I just want to say C, but also I was reading up. I think potentially the reason for that is because they were actually filming in like December and January, so
Right.
it
It was
may have
like
been too
super
cold
cold
to do
out.
skinny dipping.
Yeah, you can see some frost breath.
Yeah.
Yeah, frost on windows. Yeah. Well, yeah. Okay. Do you want to
So yeah,
move on to the bad?
let's move into bad and let's go on through this because like I said, I think there's a lot of bad stuff, but I think there's a lot of really juicy stuff to talk about in
Yeah, there's a
Schlock.
lot of the writing is just pretty bad. You said the dialogue, a lot of the characters are underdeveloped. Some of the characters I really liked.
Mhm.
I thought the acting was for this kind of movie better than average. I don't think it was great acting, but I think there was a lot of like good acting in it, which is
Yeah.
surprising for this kind of movie. But characters undeveloped, underwritten, bad dialogue. Like you said, things aren't set up and paid off properly. I think my biggest bad is replaying the cold open, the end of part 2. Like you don't need that. You did not need that at all. It's like what 5 minutes of the film.
See, I liked that.
I hated it. But that's
I
cool. We can.
I
That's
liked it because it gave us the true I feel like it gave us the true ending of the second movie, and that the second movie it's set up as like, okay, did this happen? Did this not happen when he busts through the window and she gets hauled away in the morning? Um, and it's kind of a trope that we see carried on into this movie in a different way. Um, but by showing him get up, I mean that could be part of the ending of the second movie. But I think when we go from that into the grocery store with Harold and Edna, which I love that whole sequence.
I
I
love. Yeah,
love this
I
sequence.
see. I would just cold open on the whole Edna scene.
I think it gives us like such a clear picture of the time frame, right? That this is the next evening. right? So
Maybe.
people are wondering why Jason, why is he bald in this, whereas before he had a beard and long hair? Well, he's had an entire day to like shave and essentially like kind of try to mask his identity, which is something he's trying to do throughout the film, right?
I
Is
wish they would have had a montage of him trying on all the different clothes that the two people had.
or if they did like in The Fugitive, where it shows him shaving.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, I get your point. I think you could have done that with maybe a minute of that, like the very end
Yeah,
of that, shown that,
I
not
agree.
the whole 5 minutes of that thing. I'm like, okay, I get it. And lots of horror movies do this, and I think it's in some ways to pad time.
Yeah. Well, and it takes up like the first 15 minutes of the movie.
Yeah,
That
the
that,
first
that whole
sequence.
with Harold and Edna, like that
Yeah,
whole first sequence before we even get introduced
it's
to our new
15 minutes
character.
before we get to the
Yeah.
teenagers. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um. So some of the kills were a little meh. Another bad that's kind of in the writing. There weren't any team ups. There weren't a couple of kids running, hiding, fighting together. Everyone was really isolated for their kills, and no one
Hmm.
knew that they were dying, which I
Hmm.
think that's fun for part of your group. But I really like in other horror movies and slashers where like two or three people are running together and maybe one of them doesn't make it out of the room, or they're like one of
Right.
them's crying, the other one's trying to shut them up, and like there's just so many cool dynamics you can have with a group trying to fight something, and it just
Yeah.
felt like everyone was isolated for all the kills. And so when Chris Higgins at the end fights Jason, she's already alone. Like
Hmm.
everyone's dead, and she had
Yeah.
no idea that any of them were dead until she starts finding him. So I think that could have been better. And
Yeah. It's interesting that, right, this is only the third movie in, but in a lot of ways, they're already starting to reference the previous movies, right? They're
mhm,
already starting to play out tired tropes, and which is, I guess, one of the reasons that they wanted to do the 3D gimmick, right? Just to try
right.
and throw audiences off, give them something new. But when what's her name, Debbie, she gets stabbed through the bed, right? That's Kevin Bacon
Yep.
in the first film, right? They're already
They're
doing their
homaging
remember
their
this?
own, yeah,
Yeah.
their own mythology, which is kind of cool, but also kind of like, eh.
Yeah, well, we've seen it.
Right. And so so when you juxtapose that with like a kill, like the upside down, the walking on his hands kill, I mean, that just makes the Kevin Bacon rehash that much lamer.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, it seems like he could have wrapped her up in that hammock and banged her against a tree.
Right. I think
Oh, wait.
that's part 4. So I thought it
Yeah,
was in this movie, but I'm like, oh
yeah,
man,
it's in the
where's
sleeping
the
bags.
yeah. So the last bad I have is killing off the gang too soon. I know the one
Mhm,
comes back at the very end, but here's the cool thing about having two groups of people that are willing to fight each other and hurt each other is
mhm.
if they both stumble upon a different dead body at the same time and are accusing each other of things, but then have to team up and help each other, like, and then like start like I know that we're enemies, but we have to work together to fight this supernatural evil. I think there's a really cool movie in there that was not developed at all. I'm like, oh man, I can't wait till they get there and they're going to show up. Well, they were just cannon fodder and they were killed right away. And
Right.
I get that you want to kill them because we don't care about them like we do the other characters. So it gets us a higher kill count before we have to start killing the teens we care about. I still think it's underutilized and it could have been, it's such a cool idea to bring them in.
Yeah, well,
Like,
like you said, they really missed an opportunity for some good team ups. I mean,
yeah,
Ali, he should have come out a lot sooner rather than just to jump out of the dark at the last minute and get his hand cut off. And I think in an original draft, or maybe they filmed it, I think he survives.
yeah.
So they are teamed up a little bit longer, but I think it could have come in a lot sooner. And
Well, because
yeah,
you could have had the Chris blaming him for the death of her friends and saying there's no monster
exactly.
out here. Like there's so many cool things you could do there. So
Well, and the
that's
big problem with that is that Chris never met the biker gang, so she
yeah, it's
doesn't know.
just
Now,
some random dude who shows up to like try and help her at the end. Like,
right,
was this
right,
barn full of people?
right, it's just full of vagrants.
Right. So yeah, that's all I have for bad. I'm sure there's more, but what do you got?
Let's see. We kind of touched on it. Endings. I'm not a big fan of the ending of this one, just because again it's self-referential, right? They try and
So
play
weird.
the ending of the first one with the person jumping out of the water,
But it's the
and it
mom this time.
yeah, and it just it doesn't make
Any
it,
sense.
in the first one. It's a good stinger because it's like, oh, is Jason alive? Is it a dream? Like, what is this? But in this one, right, she doesn't even know who
She's
this killer is, right? They never
right.
even say his name, Jason. They never identify what this could be. And so she doesn't know any of the mythology of the mom or anything like that. I mean, maybe she does. In fact, I think that she probably would if her family like grew up around
Crystal
Crystal
Lake.
Lake. Like
Yeah.
you'd think that they would know about the rumor of the death curse and things like that. But it just seems like such an odd ending. And her head's intact, right? Like well, I think it's a cool idea and a cool imagery. Like I just don't think it really lands.
It wasn't set up.
Um,
Had it been set up, that would have been awesome.
and then of course with Jason running out of the house, it's like the ending of the second movie,
Yep.
and then they haul her off.
And she's
Um,
insane.
so it's to me at that point it feels really played out, and I think that they would have done better at just going with something different. My other bad, uh, so this is something that's kind of interesting, that I saw pointed out, was that uh, Chris isn't facing Jason for revenge, or or just because she's not the final girl because Jason is necessarily stalking her. She's the final girl because she's facing trauma,
Yeah.
theoretically.
Yeah.
Um,
Well,
uh,
it's not the type of trauma is theoretical, but she is definitely facing trauma from him.
yeah, there was originally supposed to be an implication that she was sexually assaulted by Jason 2 years prior.
Mhm.
And they took that out of the movie. I think wisely, because I
Yeah.
think Jason works better as a force of nature, as like a vengeful spirit haunting the lake, than he does like
Yeah.
some killer with like
Yeah. Like the
psychological motivations.
the kind of hillbilly cannibal pervert.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a
That's not
different movie,
that's a
right?
different horror genre. That's not this.
So they took that out, and I think rightfully so. There are remnants of it in the movie at the beginning with Harold and Edna when she's listening to the news broadcast. The broadcaster, who is Steve Miner, uh, mentions something about like cannibalism and sexual mutilation. So there are still some remnants from that early idea in there. But I guess what I'm trying to get at is that, right, it's supposed to be about trauma.
Hmm.
Well, her not really boyfriend Rick, he's kind of a creep. Like he's sort of a jerk, right? Like, so she
Yeah.
went through this thing 2 years ago. I'm guessing she must have been either 16 or 18, because I think they're in college now.
Right.
um, because the Andy says to the gang that Shelly's his roommate. So
Right.
I would think like dorm mate or
Yep.
something.
Yep.
And so I'm guessing they're in college. So she's probably 18 when it happened or something. And she hasn't spoken to this guy very much within 2 years. She disappears. First thing he does is he sneaks up on her, grabs her by the neck, starts forcing smooches onto her. I mean, he's
And
just
then he's
really
complaining
guilting
to her
her.
about how he's missing out on a weekend with another woman.
Yeah, like this dude is like a total POS,
Yeah. I mean, maybe if someone were to grab his head and squeeze it till an eyeball pops out, I wouldn't feel too bad.
Hey, maybe, but I think that like I don't know. I think I think it's safe to say that he's the leading man, in comparison to like the leading lady, right?
Right.
maybe the second lead of this, because he seems like out of her friends, he should be the most competent, right? He's not a juggler or a pot smoker or
But
whatever.
he does let his battery die when he knows it was
Yeah,
kinda
he's all, he's also an
charged it
idiot.
yesterday.
Yeah, so I don't know. It seems like he should be the person that you think like could save the day,
Mm-hmm.
but I mean, yeah, he's a POS, and he goes out like a chump.
Yep.
Gets his head squeezed. He had a very soft baby head.
Them's the facts right there.
Them's the facts. All right. Yeah, that's all I really have for bad.
Okay.
I want to get to Schlock because I want to talk more about maybe some bigger things in this movie.
Okay. Yeah.
But I don't want to steal the stage. Chris,
No.
what do you have for
Okay,
Schlock?
so I mean, just all the 3D. It's just so schlocky. Oh, and the Harbinger. The Harbinger is so hilarious in this. He's literally laying down in the road. We've never seen him before. He's got an eyeball. He warns them off, and it's just the most phoned in written Harbinger I've ever seen. Like, we got to have it. Let's just, yeah. So that was pretty schlocky.
That's part of that bad of like not well written, and you don't get things paid off, right? That person should have come back, right? Or he should have held the eyeball up to Rick and be like, "It's you."
Yeah, and he was a fine Harbinger, but he doesn't compare to the Harbinger from the first two movies.
Right. He's no Ralph.
He's no Ralph. That's all there is to say. The whole thing's schlocky. So that's all I'm going to talk about there. I got two things I want to bring up, and then we'll get into all theories. It's all your thing. So, is Chris complicit in her friends' deaths?
How so? Like, what do you mean?
She knows that this is where she was assaulted by some freak.
Mm-hmm.
She is going there to overcome her trauma. She doesn't know if she's going to run into him again, but she just wants to go to the place where it happened to try and face her fears and heal, which is a fine thing. But no one else knows that. Everyone else thinks they're going there for a fun weekend, and she doesn't tell her kind of pseudo boyfriend until halfway through the movie. So the reason she's going there.
Her girlfriend knows it, right? Debbie knows it because she's like, "Oh, is this because of what happened?" Or doesn't she say something like that?
Kind of a little bit, but that is it. I think everyone's pretty much thinking they're going to have a fun weekend at this place where no one's at, and they're going to party and have a good time.
Yeah.
Not knowing that she's bringing him to a place where a known killer attacked her 2 years ago to try and
a known assaulter.
Oh yeah.
Sorry,
but it's when this takes place near Crystal Lake.
It's when it's when they're driving out to Crystal Lake and they see the bodies being hauled out from the grocery store, that they're like, "Hey, are you okay? Like, don't let it get to you. Like, you got to get that out of your mind." Like, it seems like they know.
I don't know. It felt to me like they didn't really know what they were getting in for.
Well, here's the thing. Like, I think I understand what you're saying. That yeah, there's some type of deformed maniac out there,
right?
And she's like, yeah, I'm sure it's fine. It was just 2 years ago.
Yeah, it just feels like that long. Yeah, it feels like they were part of a sacrifice.
Well, here's the thing. Here's kind of a question that I have with her prior experience with Jason. Did it happen? Because like, this is what I mean, where it's like the ending of the second movie where we don't know if he actually jumped through the window and chased Ginny and Paul around for a while, and then morning came and then she's being hauled away, right? It's kind of that where they cut that portion out, but she says that Jason got her. That he got her, and then she woke up in her bed and her parents never spoke of it. I just have a very, very hard time believing that if Jason got his mitts on her, that she'd be alive. And so,
okay. Well, yeah,
we have a lot of like spooky psychological mental stuff going on around Crystal Lake.
We do. And the fact that they see them jumping out of waters in their dreams. I mean, there's some there's something psychological going on. But here's the thing. I think something happened with Jason because when he takes off his mask, she recognizes him. Oh, it's you.
Right. Right.
And the way he takes off his mask is to show her that it's him. That's the
vibe
I got, is like lifting it up like, hey, remember me?
Yeah, he smiles at her for sure.
It's a knowing like, hey, yeah, it's me again.
But he does it. Well, real quick before I say that, Movie Chat and More is in the chat, and they're saying that they just rewatched 1 and 2 tonight, and they think that yes, it happened. So,
Okay.
so I might be in the minority here, but when he shows her his face, isn't he taking the mask off so that he can get the noose off from around his neck, which is a crazy part if you think about that. He like lifts himself up on the rope, and then he's holding it with one hand, holding himself up on the rope with one hand. That's insane strength, and then pulls it over.
I think that's when it happens, but the way it's shot, it is clearly him signaling to her, I'm back.
But why didn't he kill her 2 years ago?
That makes no sense. So the only thing I was thinking about this yesterday. Almost like bait.
Okay.
Like he knows. It doesn't make a lot of sense in my mind, but I'm like, if you let one of them go and they bring others back, like it's.
Yeah, but I don't think he wants people there. Like I think that is his modus operandi, is that he is like this. I keep saying spirit, but he's this creature, this force of nature that stalks this area. Like it's a territorial thing. It's like stay away, stay out of my territory, stay away from my weed farm.
Right. Well,
we watched the 2009 version.
And maybe she was on the border of where his territory is. You know what I mean? And like,
she wasn't in the kill zone. She was in the
correct. She was in the attack and throw out zone, or like, yeah. How she got back, I don't know. So I mean, again, we're trying to retcon something that's probably just bad writing.
Well, I don't know if I think it's bad writing. I just think it's unanswered writing, because. Right, I have the theory that I can't remember if I said this in the last show, but that Jason, after he drowned, his mother used the Necronomicon to resurrect him, and he was still a child. But it's the killing of people that made him like grow up. Like it's like taking life force from others that made him grow up and grow bigger. And like he doesn't necessarily know that yet, because he hasn't been substantially wounded or killed. He hasn't had a machete through his shoulder yet.
That'll change you.
But right, you see as the series progresses, and especially in this movie, he gets bigger and bulkier. His power level varies substantially in this movie. In part 2, right, he's very much still human. Like he gets kicked in the nuts. They can push him aside. They can actually somewhat hand-to-hand tussle with him. This time, right, like he's lifting himself up by one hand.
Yeah, no one really stands a chance.
In some cases, they're able to like push him over and stuff. They're still able to somewhat fight him.
Right.
But his power levels vary.
Well,
so
and the other explanation is a really simple one, but like the whole idea of like her parents don't understand her, and when she got there, they were yelling at her, so she ran off. That's a very one-sided view of a situation, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, her parents were upset, but we obviously know that they probably loved and cared about her. He could have thought
left her around.
The dad could have thought some wild animal was out there or something. It went out looking with a gun and scared off Jason before he.
So they never talked about it again because they didn't want to bring up the previous argument.
Or any of it. Just it's all traumatic, or they find her that way. There could have been hunters out in the woods and doing something. I mean, they're
Well, what I was trying to get at with I went off on the tangent of him getting bigger because of the death was that this shows so that this is taking place before the second movie. So this flashback is in between the first movie and the second movie. It shows that he was alive then. It potentially shows that he wasn't nearly as strong as he is now.
That's
Like
interesting that
he was maybe the dad could fight him off.
part of this takes place in between. It's like part 1.5. The
Right.
flashback is part 1.5. That's interesting. I didn't think about that. Yeah, I mean, it could
Yeah.
be the power growing.
And another interesting point that the movie chat more is bringing up in our chat is that when she goes into the flashback, he's wearing the clothing that he's wearing currently in the movie. And she hasn't. I was going to say she hasn't actually seen him yet, but she has. I think she sees him like maybe going into the barn.
Okay.
Like she notices something with the barn, like something crazy is going on there. And Jason is not hiding himself very well in the barn. Like there's that scene where he's just like standing there in the doorway and like
Yeah.
watching them. Like anyone, if they like look slightly to the right, would have seen him. You know what I
Right.
mean? But so maybe she caught a glimpse of him and is superimposing that image of some kind, like into her.
Well,
into
and
her
I mean,
memory.
to play devil's advocate against myself and give you a point. Let's say it didn't happen. Let's say it was supposed to be on a night when she was out with the Rick, right?
With the Rick.
With the Rick, who is
Rick
obviously
getting some.
a POS. So what if he does something, right? And he traumatizes her, and she's heard the stories of Jason because she grew up at Camp Crystal Lake, right? And so her mind goes to blame it on the boogeyman because she can't deal
That.
with what she's there. So maybe she's there and invites Rick to like confront him, and that's why all her friends are there. I mean, this is really stretching, but that's interesting.
I think that's really interesting. Rick drops her off. Maybe it's graduation party. She gets in a fight with her parents because they don't want him hanging out with Rick the Dick, and she runs off. And she's really gonna stick it to mom and dad. So she goes off into the woods to meet Rick. Perhaps he sexually. I don't know if we'll get kicked off YouTube for saying all this, but he
traumatizes her.
He traumatizes her, but it is like a blackout experience. Like I said, she's 18, maybe a little while, maybe they were drinking, maybe that's what the fight was about.
Fugue
So
state.
she doesn't remember it correctly, and she, like you say, superimposed the Camp Crystal Lake killer onto there, because we know by the time part 2 comes around that there is the lore of Jason being around,
which is so interesting that was never brought up in this movie.
But so, yeah, the way it's presented in this movie is not good.
No.
But I think that there are creative ways around it to have it in this movie and to help build the lore of Friday the 13th.
The other interesting thing, whatever happened to her, if it is Jason, what's interesting is that he doesn't lay dormant, that there are stories of one-off kills and assaults in between these mass murders, right?
Right.
It's not like he lies dormant and waits for a group of teens to show up. This flashback is saying, no, he's out there all the time, kind of like almost like a Sasquatch or a Bigfoot type character.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? And so there are thousands of untold stories and bodies lying in the woods somewhere from him, which is an interesting take because a lot of these supernatural 80s horror icons, they don't feel like they're there. They feel like they come back when they're needed and they don't exist between movies.
Right.
But this makes it feel like he exists between movies, which is interesting. Okay, do you want to move on? Or you have
Bacon
something else?
Jr. says same outfit. How embarrassing. I agree, Bacon. And movie chat does rightly point out that Rick acts like he doesn't know at all what she's talking about because she has to relay the story to him. But I mean, Rick's a dick. Like he might be like, oh yeah.
Do I believe
knew.
Yeah, do I believe the theory I just said? No, I don't think that's what happened. But it's
Well,
interesting. It's just a different take, right? It's fun to like throw things out there.
well, so you mentioned lying dormant. I brought that up earlier with Michael Myers, that he kind of like lays dormant until Halloween. It seems like, in at least in the movies that I've seen. Um, I want to talk a little bit about masks and the function that they serve, and I think this movie is very important for that, and
Mhm.
specifically the character of Shelly. So I want to move into this a little bit, talking about that dude
Okay.
and
I think you
Jason getting
have
his iconic mask.
I think you have a really cool, huge thing there. I have one small thing with Shelly and the mask I want to throw out, and then let's just go wild with it.
Hit me.
So it's it's this weird meta commentary on horror movies in general. So Shelley, the whole time, obviously the character loves the horror movies.
Hmm.
He's doing the fake deaths. He's doing the when we first see him, he's doing the kind of Michael Myers Halloween stalker behind them.
Hmm.
Um, and then he comes out with the hockey mask and the harpoon gun. And so what that's saying to me is that this character who loves horror movies and horror movie villains, that's his idea of a horror movie icon, is someone in a hockey mask with a
Hmm.
harpoon gun.
Yeah.
Now, the icon that we have doesn't have a mask yet. He's tried different things in part 1 and part 2, you know,
Hmm.
the gunny sack and different things. He takes this from a kid, and then that suddenly becomes the mask that he is known for throughout the film, right?
Yeah. He's
In
like, oh, say no more.
Right. And so that, and like you were talking about earlier, how that is like the default when you think of like a slasher film, you think of a hockey mask, right? And
Hmm.
so this character thought that that's what a horror movie monster should have. And
Right.
so he wore it there as a joke, but then in reality, that becomes, to the movie viewing audience, the most iconic thing. And there's this weird like meta circle there
Well,
that's just
so it's like the Jason character is sort of born out of the Shelley character's brain. Like, this is what he thinks a slasher should look
right,
like.
which is
Because
interesting.
really, he should have had like a scuba mask on,
Right.
right? If it were to make
Right.
sense. But
Yeah.
but it's something he created in his mind of, this is what the archetypal killer
This is
looks
the
like.
archetype. I'm creating a new monster, and his
Yeah.
name is Shelley, and he creates a Frankenstein.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting, and that leads really well into what I'm hoping to talk about, because I think that Shelley, I think that he is potentially one of the most important characters in the Friday the 13th franchise, and it's not just because he gives, or he doesn't give Jason the mask. I mean, I think clearly Jason takes the
Oh,
mask off of
I
him.
I think he gives it to him.
He's like, here, you
Yeah,
deserve this
because he
more than
doesn't
me.
he dies much later with the slit throat. So I
Yeah.
think at first he gives it to him and he probably knocks him out and comes back and kills him later.
Well, I totally love that it come like all of his pranks come back on him, right? He comes in with his slit throat,
Yeah, the boy
and
who cried wolf. Yeah.
yeah, the boy who cried wolf. I love that they did that, but getting the mask, and they probably didn't realize this at the time, right? How iconic that would be, and so
Yeah.
it seems like, right, we just see Shelly disappear, and then Jason comes out, and uh, what's her name? Verna, whatever her name is.
Yeah, Vera.
Vera, she thinks that it's Shelly, right?
Mhm.
And that's the gag. But it seems like it seems like it should be like that Darth Vader moment, where he, in Revenge of the Sith, where he like finally gets the Darth Vader mask put on. Like, it
Right.
seems like that moment should happen.
Yeah.
But the thing is that I think Shelly, in a way, he is a proxy for Jason. Like, he is, so he's not deformed, right? But he is
Redhead.
redhead. He is definitely body conscious,
Yes.
right? And he's definitely someone who's probably been picked on quite a bit.
Correct.
And when they open his wallet and look in it, we see a picture in there which I wasn't able to stop and like zoom in on it. I'm sure it's not a girlfriend. It's probably his mother.
Mother or sister or something like that. Yeah.
And so to me, it's like this person is basically Jason had he never drowned, right? So he grows up body conscious, um, interested in the macabre, right? And
Mm-hmm.
in serial killer horror movies or whatever, and he wants to continually hide his face. And so he says some interesting things. I'm trying to look at my notes here to find it. Um, Let me see here. He hold please. Okay, yeah. So it's in the beginning when he has the clear mask on. I don't know what they call those, but they're creepy masks.
They are.
The clear mask on. Um, they ask him like why he has the mask on. He says, uh, uh, "Would you be yourself if you looked like this?"
Mm-hmm.
Right. Oh yeah, that's right. They're asking like, why won't you just be yourself? Would you be yourself if you look like this? And he like lifts up the mask and puts it back down. And what that reminded me of is that this is an old personal story. This is uh, many moons ago. It was Halloween and Halloween night, and I went to like a dance club thing because that's what I thought was supposed to be fun at that point in my life. And so everyone was dressed up, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there's this guy there who's dressed like Jason. He's dressed like a Canadian Jason because he was like wearing like a jean jacket and stuff. Um,
It's a
but
boot
he
time to
had
kill you all.
yeah boot time. Sorry, but he had the mask on, and you know there's all the girls in their skimpy Halloween outfits on the dance floor, and they're all dancing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he's looking cool or whatever, and I'm like, oh man, that's a really cool mask. But then he gets off the dance floor, and I think this is really interesting. He lifts up the mask, and he is a person who uh, I don't know how to say this in a PC way, but he definitely had some sort of physical facial deformities, uh, and it was really interesting because it like kind of clicked on me that like when the mask was off, his mannerisms were completely different, right? Because he was
Mm-hmm.
showing his true self. When the mask was on, uh, he was out there on the dance floor with the ladies, you know, dancing, having a great time. And
We,
so the mask, so many slasher movies, right? You have to have a cool mask. That is a
one of the rules.
must.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's one of the rules.
Cool mask, cool
But,
weapon.
but how often, and I think this is a very important part, how often do they think of like what is the purpose of the mask? Like what is the thematic purpose of the mask? For Michael Myers, the thematic purpose of the mask is that he is faceless evil, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like this is something that could happen anywhere. This is the boogeyman. This is like this can happen in anywhere USA, right? Whereas Jason, it's something more like the mask empowers him. Hiding his face empowers him to take revenge on the people that wronged him and his mother.
Yeah, I can totally see that. It feels like there's power behind the mask because he's not ashamed, which is really a dark thing for someone to start killing people because they're not ashamed of who they are or what they had, or like you a lot of horror icons with masks, when they take the mask away, there tends to be something abnormal.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
so it's almost like the mask, like if he didn't have a mask and he starts killing people, even as you're being murdered, would you feel pity? Like, I understand why you're doing this. I don't agree with why you're doing it. I think it's wrong, but I could
Poor
see
guy.
that. Yeah, right. But in a way, I mean, like the world is a very dark and unjust place, and a lot of people do mean things to people. And so when they lash out, it's what they do isn't right, and lashing out isn't right. But you can see the path that got them there, right?
Right.
And
Well,
with a mask that severs that, that says,
well,
okay, I am unknown. You don't know why I'm doing this, so it's scarier in a way.
well, Vera says to him, she says, why do you do stupid things? Right. This is after he grabbed her leg in the water,
Right.
and he says, I have to. I just want you to like me. And she said, well, you don't have to be a jerk. And he says, being a jerk is better than being a nothing.
Right.
Right. So it changes his persona. It's how he wants people to see him in some
Hmm.
way.
Well, and
And
it's also power.
right. And Barry Vanton says there's definitely some inner self there. I don't know if he's talking about me, like maybe I'm exercising some of my demons. Maybe this is why I can be an a-hole sometime. I just want to be. I just want you to notice me.
Yeah, it's interesting. The whole idea of a mask in general is it's hiding something. Is it hiding identity? Is it hiding?
Hmm.
Yeah, it is an interesting trope that is very consistent.
Hmm. Hmm. So
Also, I mean, yeah, if you know your enemy, then it's easier to fight your enemy.
right, he's like the Batman of serial killers,
He is the Batman of serial killers.
which almost literally, which we see in part 5 and part 9, right? It's kind of like anyone can be Jason in a way, like he can pass on the evil in some regard.
Yeah.
um, so yeah, I think Shelly is, I think, right, we never really get a look into Jason's psyche. Like we get glimpses
So you
with the
think
stuff with his
Shelley
mom.
is a mirror of what Jason could have been?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's interesting that like when he kills Shelley, he rejects Shelley by killing him, but he also takes a souvenir, which is the mask.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's interesting. That's interesting. What else you
So
got?
um those are the big points that I have. Let me look here. We got a question, I think, in the comments. How old was Jason when he died? Asking because there are tests they do with infants as old as 3 that determine they know and can tell right from wrong. So
Well, I think in the first movie he was like
wasn't it like 12?
I was gonna say like 9 or 10, but yeah, I think
9 or 10?
yeah, somewhere around there.
Yeah. So I mean, he he'd been around enough to develop some personality, I think. Uh,
Well,
and so there's something interesting, right? They keep talking about doing a Camp Crystal Lake series,
mm-hmm,
on Paramount, I believe, where it's kind of young Jason. Um, and I think that there's a lot of stuff to explore there. Like my first reaction to that is like, if I don't get Jason with a hockey mask, I don't want it at all. But I think that there are some very cool things that we can explore
mm-hmm.
uh, within that time period, and we can get Jason with a hockey mask. I think there's some ways to do that.
Oh yeah, he'll try out for a hockey team or something.
Yeah, for sure. He'll get his first hockey mask and be like, "Oh man, I really like this." I'm like, "No, you can't be goalie. You can't be on the team. We're gonna
Did
bully
we
you."
did we talk about in one of the last episodes we did with Friday 13th, and I don't know if it's part 1 or part 2, about how there was a fan theory that Ralph might be his father? Or am I just
Yeah,
making that up? Yeah.
we talked about it at some point in time,
Yeah.
but I think the popular theory is that Elias Voorhees is his father.
Right, right. Yeah, I mean that's really all I have. I mean, this is it's not a great movie like story-wise, but I think it's a really important and fun movie for horror movies and slasher movies. Um it's he has the mask. This is where he gets the mask. He puts
Yeah,
on yeah, it's where Vader becomes Vader. It's the moment.
Darth Voorhees.
Darth, oh man, that's awesome. So yeah, that's all I got, man. What else you got?
We got one more comment here from Maniac Clown, who's been a fan of the show for a long time. So thank you, Maniac. Did they retcon that he didn't actually drown and grew up alone in the woods? Didn't they retcon? I think that is kind of the retcon in part 2, where they say that he didn't actually drown and he grew up wild in the woods. But I think that's kind of I think that's kind of, at this point, it's sort of the Joker's backstory.
Right.
Like we don't have like a true definitive answer yet.
Well, the other thing that's interesting about Friday the 13th that you don't get in a lot of the other slashers is the regionality of it. This is all around Crystal Lake. This is all around this whole area.
New Jersey.
Right. So it feels very much almost kind of like in the same vein of like Sleepy Hollow or something like that, where it's an old folks tale that they tell about the region. Mm-hmm. And so you're going to have conflicting stories of like, no, he was drowned. No, he was raised in the woods.
I heard he survived.
Right. Yeah. No, his mom was a killer. No, his dad was this. No, his dad was that. No, he only kills right here. No, he kills anyone. So there are so many different things. And each time he shows up, some of the facts, these people end up dead, whatever the cops find, know that happened. But anything else, especially with the dream sequences that these kids are going insane, you don't know which is what really happened and which is part of the folklore surrounding that.
It's almost like the unreliable narrator in some ways. It's like a third person unreliable narrator.
Yeah. Of like campfire tells that they're passed down orally, like that oral tradition of stories that like, we talked about this too in like The Fog, where it's like, this is part's boring. Okay, we're going to change it for the kids now, so they're excited about this. Yeah. And so you have this growing, changing mythology, and there's nuggets of truth in the center, but there's all these other little points that you can retcon or not, that fanboys like us are sitting here in a chat talking about for hours, right?
Yeah, for sure. Let's see. I'm kind of running out of things. Those are the big things. There are so many other things I could talk about in this movie, like the group, Chuck and Chili, the stoners. Don't they seem like age inappropriate to be with these other kids?
They feel like seniors in college, and these guys are freshmen in college. Very much so.
I thought it seemed like he was like, I don't know, their
late 30s
professor or something.
Could be. It could just be their drug dealers.
Yeah, for sure. So there are so many great things in this movie.
I love when they have to like eat the weed when the cops are going by them and they realize that it's not for them, but it's actually going to the murder of Edna. That's a fun bit of comedy that's actually in character of the film. Like that could happen. Like, it's a great gag.
Yeah, for sure. I think we're running out of time. I'm very thankful for all these people that have come into the chat.
Thank you.
Continue this tradition for sure. Next Friday the 13th, mark it on your calendar. We will be back with part 4. But don't worry, because we're going to be back next month. We don't know what we're going to do yet, but we're going to do a Halloween special for sure. So if you have a favorite Halloween movie, please leave it in the comments. If you're listening to this on Spotify or Apple Music, please leave a review or a rating. Tell your friends about it. I am Darby Ellis. This is Chris Anonymous. We've been compelled by Schlock, and we will see you guys next time. Thanks again, guys. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.